I invite Mr. Panduranga Acharya, Legal Head Swiggy, to moderate this discussion. Over to you, sir.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for those who are watching this video virtual conference from different time zones. I welcome everyone and thank you for taking out time to attend this virtual conclave. And I would like to I'll take this privilege to introduce panelists. Our first panelist is Rajendra Punde. Rajendra Punde he has 25 years of experience and is a qualified lawyer and a company secretary too. And he has been in digital e-commerce space and payments, retail, telecommunication, consumer goods, and has been a group head called corporate governance and secretary for Flipkart, Walmart Group. And then he was head legal and director and compliance for Mintcard, which is eBay. Rajendra also does a training session for National Law School University, and then senior public prosecutors and Indian Police Service, Central Bureau of Investigation, and so on and so forth. Mr. Rajendra, welcome to you in the panel.
Yeah, thank you, Panduranga.
So the other panelist, Mr. Yogesh Wadhwa. Yogesh Wadhwa is a general counsel at Nissan Middle East now, and before going to Middle East, he was with Nissan India. And he is currently handling legal issues for Middle East, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and he is based out of Dubai. And he was associated with General Motors before, and he was also working with consulting firms like Fox Mandel, PwC in his earlier state. Yogesh is among the top 100 general counsels by Legal 500, and our welcome Yogesh to the panel.
Thank you, Panduranga. Looking forward.
Yeah. So we have Roop. Roop is the third panelist. She might join. If not, she's already joined. Just an introduction. Roop Lumba carries 16 years of experience, and she's a general counsel, head of ethics for India and South Asia at Rolls-Royce, and she is also among the top 100 general counsel by Legal 500. So I am Panduranga Acharya, moderating this last panel of the day of this ADR virtual conclave. And we are assembled to discuss the topic, virtual court hearing and e-court and COVID-19, a practicable approach to deal with the current crisis. So interesting to have be part of this virtual conclave. Hi, Roop. Thanks. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
I just gave your introduction. Hope you have joined by then. Welcome to the panel.
Thank you so much, Panduranga, and sorry for joining in late because of the technical glitch.
That's all right. So, dear audience, today's conclave, ADR virtual conclave, has a wonderful caption: the future of the dispute resolution, right? So, I mean, I'm sure you have heard two of the day from eminent speakers. I mean, this particular topic of virtual court hearings and the practicable approach to deal with current crisis is also an interesting topic. With that, I would start the discussions. I'm hoping that we have 40-45 minutes of the discussions and have reserved some 15 to 20 minutes of Q&A. If any questions, we would be more than happy to have them addressed to our panelists. So start. This pandemic has forced the judicial dispensation to move virtual. It's not more of a readiness, but it is of a compulsion. It looks so for me at least. But technology has come to the rescue, and a virtual court hearing made possible because of the technological intervention. Under this context, so I have a couple of questions to the panel. I'm opening it to Rajendra Punde and then maybe followed by Roop and Yogesh, both of you. The question is, do you think we are all well prepared to adopt the new way of judicial dispensation? And what are the practical challenges that we are facing in general, which needs an immediate fix?
Yes, I think I agree with you. This actually is a great time to have this discussion. Coming straight to the point on whether we are prepared for the situation, as you rightly pointed out in the opening statement, that the choice is no longer with us. If you see, the courts already have, in so many ways, ushered in the online or the virtual court system. We have the Delhi High Court guidance notes coming in 2009 with the amendments, I think, Appendix B to the Delhi High Court original site rules of 2018. In India, also, approximately 3,000 court complexes or 16,000 courts are computerized. I don't think they actually have been tested in the manner that we are currently doing. Given during the day today, for this particular conclave and the discussions that we have had, there are technical issues and glitches even for participants and panelists to be joining in and being able to participate effectively. But that said, I think the preparedness is one thing. The challenges I would, call out more from cultural barriers. I think, and the legacy viewpoint. Let's say whether the thinking I'm sensing is how do we set the technology framework on the existing process. For me, I don't think that is an approach that we should be taking. I think what essentially needs to be looked at is how the processes need to fit into what is required. If I'm a litigant, and I'm sure each one on the panel has been a litigant in his, for his company and been in court at several points in time. As a litigant, the expectation clearly is that the process should be transparent, efficient, effective, and speedy. And I think on all of this, there is definitely a scope for improvement. Again, for me, this is not an either or approach. This is something that can coexist as we gradually move to a speedier and disposal system by getting in technology. Wherever technology has gone into, because I've been in the e-commerce space for over a decade now, my understanding is the initial view has always been disruption, and a lot of processes that we've been doing in an offline world. Even Swiggy, as you lead Swiggy, you know that very well. A lot of business, initiatives or processes or models are not even in existence for a long time, and technology has brought those out. So wherever technology has gone in, it's the initial view or the initial impact has been that of disruption. We have to contain that and see how we can embrace that and make it more useful for the way we want things to go forward. Those are my initial thoughts. There are, of course, issues on confidentiality, the cost, access, but I see that a lot of governments across the world have actually gone about and made speedier processes available to litigants and court and the judiciary staff, judges, to ensure that these things move on at a faster clip. So those are my initial thoughts on the two questions, Panduranga. Thank you.
So what I hear from you, it's not of infrastructure and connectivity are certainly an issue, but a bigger issue to be immediately be fixed is the mindset, right? How we think we have.
I think we should not shy away from that. I've been being in the profession for 25 years, and yes, I have also like a countless number of travels I've undertaken. My team does that every other day. Has been doing it for a long time. And whenever you have a court hearing, you travel a day in advance, maybe the day before in the morning, to schedule a conference with the super senior counsel in Delhi, wherever it is, then going to the hearing without knowing whether actually the hearing will happen. But that is something that we've been doing things. There is a certain comfort with that. There is a certain a familiarity with that process now. I think we should. So one is to deal with that, and the second is actually to see how this is going to. The virtual code and the online code systems are actually going to assist us. Ultimately, litigation, the entire process is aimed at ensuring that litigants and the issues get resolved, right? I mean, that objective we should not miss sight of. If you go from that standpoint, yes, I think this is something we should, in all fairness, welcome and try to see how we can fit it. It's not going to be easy to fit that directly. The access issues, very few lawyers or law firms currently having access, and litigants not across the country not having access to the infrastructure, the high cost potentially of having those set out are definite challenges. I'm not saying they are not, but we should also be mindful of the softer challenges that are lurking behind and that can also impede it.
Yeah. Well said. Thank you so much for that. Yogesh, it is now, do you agree with him? You have a different thought. See, breaking a routine is something not okay for everyone. There is a normal reluctantness, and most importantly, changing mindset. Infrastructure we can definitely buy it, fix it. Changing mindset is something that is a core issue. Equally there are other issues. I'm hope to hear from you more on that.
I think I totally agree with Rajendra. It's a mindset change. It's a cultural change which people have been used to for the last so many years. But one side where we say that it has been a wake-up call for the Indian courts. So let's talk about the very basic premises. Dispensation of the justice, that's very important. And we stay in a society which is very spread out to rural cities to urban cities where there are so many litigants, and so it is very important that everyone gets an access to the justice. Having said that, when this pandemic started, I think it was a wake-up call, as I mentioned, for the courts also. While there have been scenarios where in the past also technology has been used, but I'm sure it's a long way to go. Still, technology came to the rescue. So there have been scenarios where almost all the urgent hearings have been happening. The Supreme Court, the High Court, the District Court to some extent, they all started with giving their judgments. They started hearing the litigants, and the orders have been pronounced. So at one side, that requirement of dispensation of justice has been definitely met. If you say that whether that's the way to go or there have been no challenges, I think the answer is no. It's a very long way to go. If we simply talk of even the penetration of the internet, I was reading some statistics. There is a large section of the population. I think it's internet is available only to 52% of the population at this stage, with 25% people on their smartphones. So it's a very long way to go where people will start having even access to the basic internet facility. So secondary will be the scenario where they start having access to virtual courts or video conferencing. So those kind of challenges are very much there. There have been challenges, in fact, in the basic technology also, which has been used in the courts, where we keep on reading many examples where while two lawyers are speaking and making their arguments, they can't hear each other. The judges can't see each other. So those kind of challenges are very much there. I'm sure there's a lot of improvement. I'll say it has to be a future is a healthy mix of the open courts versus the virtual courts, which can possibly help in a much faster way of judicial delivery with the technology. This also brings a lot of transparency. It brings accountability. So those kind of improvements are very much there. I think we are going to go with that.
Well articulated, Yogesh. I really I like the way you lean towards technology while reiterating the change in mindset is important. Yes, it is important. An adoption of technology or an adoption of a new way of working is only possible when there is a lot of comfort. An alternative way of doing things has to come with a lot of comfort that will draw more adaptability. And I think that is the essence of your words. Thanks for that. I now move to Roop. Hey Roop, you heard both of them. You have any thought?
Thank you, Panduranga. Yes, and very valid Rajendra. So my thoughts around it is twofold. One, that we have transparency, speedy justice, which Mr. Rajendra also pointed out. And secondly, of course, how technology can support us not only during these pandemic times, but otherwise also. So here we need to see how prepared we are. If we were not prepared, I don't think any court would have been able to hear urgent matters, as a lot of courts are hearing urgent matters. So I think there is a certain degree of preparedness there. When it comes to can this go to further to trial courts and other courts, we have to look into that. But as far as preparedness for hearing urgent matters is concerned, I think it has been proven that the preparedness is there. yes, there are technical glitches which will invade because we were not prepared for this, that this will come and hit us suddenly. But at the same time, I think now going further, since we've been exposed to this time, we need to look into this, that how we can make use of this e-codes system more effectively, and how we can integrate the procedure of the court, the existing procedure of the court in e-hearings. So that is something that we need to see. And further, we also need to see that how the judicial system or the courts, they build an integrated platform which is exclusively controlled by them, so that there's more, as far as data privacy is concerned, those concerns are addressed. And there's more comfort to the litigants as well as more comfort to the judiciary also.
Great. Thanks, Roop, for that. I mean, this answer of yours is drawing me towards how the system may be abused or may not be abused. How protections and protocol could be very helpful in mitigating all those. But while I hear few of the eminent lawyers and also some judges saying that virtual courts are not here to replace the open court hearings. I think pandemic the current crisis is something has to be dealt with virtual courts. But when things were to normalize, should we like go back to the open court practice or a physical court practice? Is something kind of a dilemma, right? If there is no continuity, then adoption is definitely will not be that great. This is taking me to another question. Like I mentioned, this pandemic also have really changed the way we do our businesses. Everyone have changed their business, the way they do businesses. And the going forward in the future case also, we may not do our businesses the same way that we used to do earlier. By introduction of a social distancing, all other hygiene norms, right? So under this context, I would want to understand from you, dear panelists, do you think trial conducted in the lower courts, specific to lower courts, I'm asking this, in all stages, without being abused, such as tutoring witness, assisting witnesses in cross-examination by their lawyers, because technological means are such that we may not really able to ever understand if there is anything happening behind the cabin. So I throw up this question to Rajendra.
Yeah, thanks, Panduranga. So I think, let's go in with a view that presently we don't have ready answers or executable solutions for everything, right? And the lower courts, as we were having a brief conversation yesterday, I called out that there have been instances which senior advocates who have worked have pointed out that there are situations where in a magistrate court at a particular point in time, maybe one or two hearings also go simultaneously. Yes, the points that you bring out are for potential challenges. At the same time, to the extent possible, as if we try, I'm just restating what I said in response to the earlier question you had, if we try to put a technology framework on top of what are the current practices, then that is actually automation. And that is not exactly, having a technology-related improvement or, technology-enabled processes. There you will need to, we will need to understand what specifically needs to be reviewed, rectified, and made in a manner that is transparent, ensures speedier disposal of cases. So, for example, uploading documents, scrutiny, removal of defects, submission of evidences by affidavit, chief and cross. In certain countries, I've read on the internet when I was, studying for this session, the remote court work worldwide, the new service for judges and lawyers, records that a lot of developments have been made in several courts across the world to enable online courts and virtual courts to operate in as seamless manner as you can. The US Supreme Court, like taking oral evidences, and I also read about the Supreme Court of Norway, which actually issued orders in a penalty for a sexual assault, all without the participant being present. So there are ways in which we can do this, and there would definitely be certain challenges that presently in the circum that we are appear to be insurmountable, but I don't think so. As I again said, this is not an either or. I don't think we should be looking at virtual courts as completely replacing the physical courts at a point in time. They will need to, for all intents and purposes, to coexist to ensure that the justice dispensation system works efficiently. But gradually, as we go along, we will keep on learning and keep improving that. For that, we should take the step and start working on those lines as we say. So that is my thoughts on the question that you asked. Thank you.
Great, Rajendra. Thank you so much. And we need to start when we will definitely solve our problems, right? Yogesh, I would like to hear from you.
So, Panduranga, I'll start with an example here. So, sometime in 2014, there was a case which was for the first time done by the session courts in Karnataka. This was a case of anti-human trafficking unit where certain people were caught, used to abduct people and use them as a bonded labor. Now here, while there were witnesses, there were people who were wanted to come as an evidence and depose against the people who were caught. There was a question to their life and there was a threat, so they were not very comfortable. So here, in the first time in 2014, the session court in Karnataka, they actually allowed their disposition through a video conference, and this was a very welcome step which was taken. So while not only the bonded labor who was rescued, but there were 3 witnesses who were deposed before the camera, and then the justice was served in that particular case. On the same matter, even the Supreme Court said that why not? Let's try and work around this kind of a scenarios where possibly to protect the identities of the people, to ensure that while the people who could be stranded in different kind of cities and because of the distance problem or the timing issue, if they are not able to travel, the video conferencing kind of a scenario can actually cut down on all the cost. It can help people to see that they are very well protected, and equally they serve the justice. So this was a big example which was set up. After that court, there were, after that particular judgment, there were other courts also which adopted a very similar kind of a practice. So what we are saying that this has a lot of advantages of technology, which has been used in the past also. I'm sure even today in the kind of society we stay in, similar kind of examples could be served. It could be served to the interest of the litigants, and evidence could be taken in a trial, which cost big kind of cases which are pending. But having said that, I think what we are speaking here is it's a mindset change. So the way the lawyers operate today, the way litigants have been used to, everyone is very, very used to a particular kind of way in which the proceedings are conducted. The way witnesses are grilled in front of the courts and the lawyers. Those kind of things are very much going to remain, but the technology has its own charms, it has its own advantages, which yes, should be definitely used, to my view, and should be broadened for a better justice and a better delivery.
I'm sure you have interesting anecdotes and stories about how a trial court, trial conducted in the trial courts. And with this question, what is your thought? I will very interested in it.
So yes, Panduranga, I would tend to agree with Yogesh on this, that technology has its own advantages. It gives you speed, it gives you accuracy. There may be some glitches in technology, but then if you see the overall benefits, they overpower the drawbacks. So it has its inherent advantages. As far as the trial courts are concerned, I think mixture of approach will have to be adopted, that we have physical courts as well as virtual courts. And the answer to this is perhaps the cases would have to be classified, which can be relegated for virtual hearing to start with, and something that there are not many many points of law which are involved can be delegated to virtual courts to start to test the system for a long term, and matters which are serious and matters involving serious criminal prosecutions can still make use of physical courts. Still, we travel that much of distance to integrate the procedural aspects with the virtual courts.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you so much.
If I can add a point here, besides the pros and cons of what we are talking here, another important aspect of the regular hearings in the court is it's a learning ground. So a lot of lawyers who stand in the court, they learn from the way proceedings are happening. I mean, all the young lawyers or even the experienced people. There's an understanding of what happened in that particular case. People are watching it because it could be very similar to their facts. The way evidences are conducted, the way trials are conducted. So that acts as a very, a breeding kind of a ground for lawyers to learn. So the way in case only we start moving more towards a virtual kind of a hearing, virtual kind of a courts, that will be an important point which is going to miss out. So how will people know what's happening in other matters? How will they understand that if there was something similar which was to their advantage in their particular matter which could have been used? How will they see that, how the evidence has been recorded and the witness have been grilled? That will be a missing point, which will be a big time. And so from that advantage perspective, yes, it's the open courts, which is the way forward.
Understood. I think it's a very valid point. That is taking me to the next question. My next question is on the same line. Right? We have, many party-in-person matters where individuals fight their own cases. By these kind of a virtual courts, do you see over a period of time that the dependency on the lawyers will increase and the party-in-person matters will decrease? Because the confidence are like how I do it, because this doesn't definitely lacks a experience, or someone really not sure of like how the court proceedings are done, would be a bit hesitant in appearing by himself or herself. So in that context, my question is whether that will increase the dependency of practicing lawyers and discourage the party-in-person cases. So Yogesh, you want to take this first?
Well, I think I'll stay on my comments as I mentioned. So, I agree that this is an initial learning phase for both litigants as well as lawyers. But with time, everyone is learning. There are scenarios where the kind of filing it's being done in the virtual courts today, or in the times to come, that could be possibly streamlined more. Once even the litigants are able to learn those nuances, and with the understanding of the technology, I'm sure they'll be not hesitant to do the things themselves and fight their own cases. So, what we are talking, it's a good mix of things which is going to happen. There are consumer courts in which all the litigants can appear by themselves. Once they start opening up with such kind of technology advancements, I'm sure litigants will be more than happy to do the things themselves.
Yeah, great. Would you want to add to what Yogesh mentioned?
Yeah, I would go back to the same point that it is all about perception and mindset change. So as we start treading this path, I'm sure people will change their mind towards this. It's not an analogous example. If you take the mobile phones, today you will have mobile phones in everyone's hands. Still some years back, say 15, 16 years back, only few people were holding mobile phones. So it's all a mindset change. Everyone knows how to use a mobile phone. It's not that today you'll have mobile phones in the hands of elite only. You have mobile phones in everyone's hands. They know, they are well versed how to use the apps. They are well versed. So I think similar mindset change will happen once we start treading the path. And as I said, we will have to classify the cases. I think one of the cases which can successfully be relegated to the virtual courts are the consumer cases. Then small cases such as challans, traffic challans, loan cases. So these kind of cases are the cases which need to be looked into, which which is adding to the volume of the cases and which can be relegated to the virtual courts. I think we need to look at that as the time passes. We'll evolve further to look at other serious matters also towards by delegating them to the virtual courts. But as we become more efficient, but yes, I would say that it's all a mindset change. So as far as the litigants are concerned, in person today also, we don't have huge volumes of litigants appearing in person. So we only have appearances through lawyers. So, but then I don't see that too much as too much of a area of concern. But as I said, as this channel opens up, anyone has a litigation, a personal litigation or a company litigation, as this channel opens up, we'll all learn and we'll all evolve. And I don't think it will be a concern for personal hearing of a person appearing in person for his litigation. I don't think so.
Thanks, Roop, for that. Rajendra, yeah, please.
Yeah, so I think I completely agree with what Roop just said. One is even the current scenario, party in-person appearances are, ultimately guided by practicing lawyers, yes. But party in-person cases, we all know for a fact that if you at a personal level have, let's say, one real estate matter or one property matter, or anything that's actually come up, that makes you a fairly good, I would say, not an expert completely, but you understand the nuances of how litigation progresses because you actually have worked on this. I can give an example. A colleague, a very junior colleague in my earlier organization, had a very complicated property matter, and his understanding of property laws in Karnataka were really much better than most of the lawyers that I had met because he actually was involved himself. Having said that, over a period of time, as the virtual court system and the physical courts processes which currently are there, as they enmesh and they go along together, the understanding will definitely continue to be developed, and people will have a better understanding. Ultimately, even when party in-person cases did happen, a lot of folks did start off with this more as a learning process. So going forward, when virtual courts also come into play and are taken up as a matter of not as a choice, but something which is as a category, you would go in for a virtual court in a particular case or a matter. That's how it will also develop. Currently, the categorization is urgent only and online only. I think that is something just enforced as such or mandated by the pandemic situation. I think that is something that will change as we move along.
Yeah, very valid point, Rajendra. A couple of questions that I could see has come through. We will take it later. Is also on the same lines as such. There are cases where litigants think it's urgent and important, right? How do we convince the court and court were to agree and then matter be listed is also another challenge that they'll have to go through. And then party in-person cases, they're not sure, like if the party in-person want to file a complaint or file a case, how would you file a case? It's not that easy and straightforward. The steps are not that, user-friendly. I think it's more of a, I'm sure there is some reviews by Supreme Court filing how it is possible. Could that be extended to all the trial court filings also and high court filings also? And other various tribunals filing, how filing could be, e-filing could be made is something is not easily accessible to the litigants. So with that, I'll thank you all three of you for the good insights on the questions that I've asked. I want to move to the next question. It's more of a lawyer specific and the professional specific question. With this, online ODRs have been there for 20 years from now. With the introduction of virtual courts, the expectation from the litigants would be to seek quick disposals of matter, right? So under this context, I would like to hear from you on, do you think the court will, virtual courts will be real fast in disposing the matter than of open courts. In terms of, could the argument can be filing papers, could be crisp, concise document are filed, unlike a voluminous paper as regularly filed, and most of the time, because virtual courts, parties attending virtual courts cannot be missed because various other factors. So the multiple adjournments could have been reduced. If that could also add to faster disposal is the question. I open it to Roop. So Roop, you go ahead to answer this question.
So thank you, Panduranga. I think virtual courts definitely will add up to speedy disposal of matters in case, because it will be speedy filing, speedy processing of fees, and so these advantages will be there. But at the same time, I think if we follow the same court procedures, say civil procedure code or criminal procedure code, then we may have to look at what are the necessary amendments to be brought in those procedural aspects also. Then only we can look at effectively disposing of the cases in a speedier manner. So it has to be, the procedural aspects have to be integrated with the technology aspects. The law of evidence has already been amended, as you're aware of, that to take on record the online digital evidence. It's only that you have to just write an application and put it on record. So similarly, while making use of e-courts, the procedures may have to be amended so that there are speedier ways of disposal of matters. But as I would also like to state here that it is going to be a gradual process. It cannot be a quick process because it cannot be done in haste. It has to be done very carefully, and it has to be a gradual process.
Understood.
Thank you.
Understood. Thanks. Yogesh, may I have your thoughts?
I agree with Dhruv that it's going to be a gradual process, and since the beginning of the session we have been talking of the practical challenges. So while I totally agree that technology can bring a lot of transparency, much more speed, which can help in possibly filing of a lot of all the affidavits, all the procedures, requirement, the submissions can be done. But the question is, are we really ready for that? Are we challenging towards it? So if you look at the scenario since the lockdown happened, the normal functioning in the courts have got disturbed. So it started with a scenario where the courts have been only hearing the urgent matters. There have been only few selected matters in which the courts have gone into detailed kind of orders. Similarly, there have been vast lawyers. There's a big lawyers body who have been asking the courts to open up. In fact, yesterday only I was reading this letter which has been written by the Bar Council of India to the Chief Justice of India, requesting that the open courts should be opened. We should be back to normal from 1st of June. So the kind of mindset what we need to be we are working on, there's a lack of infrastructure. There has been a possible process what we have been following. We have been used to it. Let's continue with it. So it's definitely a gradual change which we need to adopt. We need to have a better penetration of the facilities in terms of technology, infrastructure, and a better access to the justice so that people can actually understand that these facilities are very much available, which could be help in faster delivery of justice, as well as can avoid long travels, cost. So those advantages have to be well understood by our society at large, and definitely technology can go at a very fast pace to help in delivering justice and helping on all these kind of scenarios.
Great, thanks. That is the way how the future is looking like.
So, right, I think again, the pandemic, I think, has actually provided us an opportunity, right, by a way of a mandate, because of the impossibility for the risk to life of and imposing social distancing and email communication as a way in which everybody is today communicating. Given that, I think fortunately or otherwise, but I would still go with fortunately in this case, is the judicial system, because of this mandate, actually is slightly ahead of the curve. Yes, in terms of the expectations that we have, in terms of the urgency of matters that we need to be looked at, and the life as it goes or it should go on is fairly dependent on a lot of matters currently pending in the court or as and when they come up. This is from that standpoint in the nascent stage. We do not, as I said earlier, do not have, and even I think Yogesh and Roop alluded to that, we do not have ready answers, executable solutions for now. But progressively, we would be able to develop those, whether we want to completely change the processes and the systems to reflect what is the intent of the statutes, how ultimately litigants will benefit from a speedier disposal of matters, and progressively then can we consider having the judicial body or maybe the Supreme Court or even the high courts categorizing matters that can go into virtual courts or they can go into open courts. If we today take the entire pendency of matters, which in India is at over 3 crore matters, and I think Supreme Court has 60,000 plus cases that are pending. I mean, we can only take some comfort from the fact that Brazil, I believe, has 8 crore matters, so we've got a 5 crore delta there. But having said that, maybe we can consider moving some of those matters, reviewing those which have been pending for a while and seeing if they can go into virtual courts, so that there is a clear repository of matters which have now moved to virtual courts, and seeing from example and experience and working those, what is the learning we have and how we go about using that learning in sharpening the execution process as we go along. I think this has to be a humongous learning process for all participants, all stakeholders, including those on the call, those who are participating as on the conclave here, and everybody in the profession at all points in time. So I think, as Yogesh said, a gradual process, but we'll have to take the step, and we take the step any which way. I don't know if I was audible, but I'm getting a pop-up message here. Could you hear me, Panduranga?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Perfect. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. You need to fix your video in the interim. So thank you so much. I would sum it up. Yes, the speedier dispensation is possible, and virtual courts with the technological intervention mostly solves those administrative hassles. Most of the time, the court matters have been urgent due to various other reasons, which is more of administrative in nature. If those could be removed, the dispensation of justice could be faster. Despite I'm saying about advocates filing a brief, petitions, and the matters were taken on the subject, and focusing on subject, disposing very quickly is another sheen that we could see this virtual courts could definitely bring in. With this, I move to the last question of this panel session to the panelists. My question is, do you see the transition from the traditional way of doing things have taken away sheen from the practicing lawyers, right? So is that something really been considerate for the practicing counsels, because that all that sheen is gone if the virtual courts were to come in and the open courts were to go. We're not really thinking of a way where the real courts will go away and we will have to only left with the virtual courts. But otherwise, generally, do you think the sheen has gone, or is an apprehension of that sheen being gone? I would, who would gonna take this question? I would go to Yogesh.
Well, Panduranga, so I think we briefly touched on this point earlier in my comments. If we talk again of the open courts, as we mentioned that, on a normal day where a particular case hearing is happening, there are at least 20 to 30 lawyers who are watching it. Now, they could be watching for interest, for learning, as well as to see that the matters what they are actually dealing with, whether these kind of arguments, whether these kind of precedents can be used and can be fit into those cases what they are dealing into. So yes, when it comes to virtual court, those learnings, those the way of arguing, the precedents, that sheen has definitely gone away. People may not know what kind of arguments were made in some other court, what kind of matters have been taken up. Yes, there could be orders what people can read, but the way, in the initial years, what we learned, the way our senior counsels used to argue in front of the court, and we used to stand up on the back benches to see that, what kind of arguments are being made, those things have gone missing, definitely.
I think I think Yogesh very clearly called that out, in response, and he just mentioned to that as well. Physical courts and actually visiting the court house, meeting with the lawyers, being in the court and being there when the hearing is actually happening right before you. These are all, terrific learning experiences, right? They actually are what would make one a better lawyer every day. You think is, I spend in the court, but nothing happens in my matter. But you actually learn a lot by just, in a manner being around with people who are also litigants and senior lawyers and, interacting with them. All of that obviously goes. Coming to specifically from a practice standpoint, whether this will change or takes away the sheen of practice for lawyers. I think just as I said earlier, technology will continue to cause disruption where it goes in the initial, but the benefits will far outweigh whatever initial adverse impact is there. The definition of what service is from an practicing lawyer to his clients, that service definition changes. It's not only providing legal guidance and advisory and of course all the actions in the court of law, but also providing the technical support when the matter is actually before a virtual court. At no point in time, I think we should have to worry about good lawyers and professionals who will always be sought after by litigants as and when matters specifically come up. And technology can aid, and that's what we should be absolutely very clear in our mind. Technology can aid, but cannot totally replace human expertise and legal professionals for sure. In that case, we would have an AI algorithm that can instead work as the judiciary for us for a while. But I don't think that's what we are we looking at, or at least now we are looking at. So I think going forward, initially, yes, lawyers will who have that technology savvy and the infrastructure, they would be the preferred, places where litigants will actually go and approach for support. But this is something which will actually even out as a playing field going forward. So the sheen would not completely be taken away, but it will actually get more I think subjective and more solid, and the dependency will increase significantly is what I think.
So it evens out is what you say. Thank you for that. Roop, over to you.
Yes, in few aspects, I do agree that maybe there may not be as much sheen as of the lawyers as it used to be in physical courts, because I do remember our younger days that we used to earmark one court at least in a week that we will go and witness the proceedings, and that was the biggest learning experience. And we would go there with a lot of awe for the senior counsels and hear them argue the cases, would pick up so many points from them, would understand the matter. So that to that extent, yes, I do remember the packed courtrooms and we squeezing into those courtrooms and finding ourselves some place to sit down and watch the proceedings. To that extent, as Yogesh said, yes, the sheen of practicing lawyers gets a little bit decrease to that extent. But as far as the competency and your real talent is, I think a person, no matter what the mode may be, whether it is a physical court or is it a virtual court, a person who has that, who's a good lawyer will always be a good lawyer. So to that extent, I don't think there'll be any loss of steam.
Thank you for that, Roop. I think we have come to the end of the session. So these are all the questions that I had for the panelists. And now to sum it up, with the panel, the conversation that we had, and also I am following few of the conversations since morning, going by the series of panelists and the conversations had. It looks, everyone is inclined towards virtual close, and the virtual court will be the norm going forward, and the physical courts will be there. And then, yeah, I mean, it is a good blend that, how you really evolve to become a better dispute resolution or justice delivery system is something that everyone is aspirationally looking at. It's a good conversation, all the panelists. Thank you so much for all of you. I have a couple of questions before we wind it up. I just have these questions to the panelists. Anyone want to pick up the question could just go straight away, go ahead and answer the question. The question number one is, while virtual hearing will be a boon for the metros and tier 1 cities, what ecosystem requirements must be put in place in rural areas, sub-tier towns where availability of infrastructure and sufficient bandwidth is not around, not in a good, not a ground reality, and as a lack of technology awareness, what kind of a basic training is required, right? Can some Indian startup being a low bandwidth open source software can be integrated to the court ecosystem? I think it's someone from the startup ecosystem asking a good question. What kind of a training is required, and is there a scope for the startups to integrate with this dispute resolution?
So this is Rajendra. I think I'll just go make a first stab at this. I actually said this during the discussion here, and I think Roop brought it out very clearly when she said that like quite some time back, not everybody had smartphones, and even Yogesh called out that the internet penetration and the manner in which and I've been in the e-commerce space for a while. I've seen it myself how internet penetration has in fact significantly grown today. So the metros and small towns and other areas which are not fully engaged or in the mainstream have gradually been able to also join and get the benefit of that. I think as you've called out, this is going to be a gradual process. This is not something that we will let's say look at the end of the next month or middle of the next year, that we have solutions for all of this. The infrastructure will actually be set out. In such cases, I'm sure the government, and even when we are mandating virtual court systems, we can have those in a phased out manner to ensure that those areas where these facilities are not available, the open court systems as currently they are available should continue, and they be gradually replaced as and when the infrastructure setup is in place. And this, as I said earlier, also it's going to be an ongoing learning process. And that's the way to look at it, is what I would say. I think it's not, it actually has to be, it will be a gradual process and will take a while to come up to full steam. But it's about implementation and going in with a view that yes, we need to do this, going in with a view that as a solution oriented approach, and maybe changing the mindset issue on this part. Yeah, thank you.
Yogesh, Roop, you want to add, or can I go ahead with the next question?
I think that's the most important question. It touched the pulse. So as we have been talking, that we are actually not prepared at this stage because of lack of technology, the infrastructure, the mindset, the education factor, everything going together. It's going to be a long way for us. It's definitely a good beginning which has been made. People have adopted themselves fast to it, the way things have been happening. But yes, it's a long way to go. It's going to be a big learning for all of us, for people in the rural sector, in the urban sector, change of mindset, everything coupled together. But definitely, technology is there to stay.
Thank you, panelists, for an engrossing discussion. Now we have moved towards the end of the virtual conference, which indeed provided us wonderful content and valuable key takeaways. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for being such an incredibly well-informed audience. Thanks to all our esteemed panelists and speakers